welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I am doing the mid-year freak-out book tag. I love this tag. I love like quarterly and mid-year kind of tags, kind of check in on how my reading is going, how my goals are going, stats, favorite books, least favorite books, all that kind of stuff. So this tag actually doesn't really have any questions about stats or anything like that, but if you're nerdy about stats like me, I'm gonna include some of that stuff in here, but I'll have timestamps if you wanna just skip right to the tag questions. So far this year, according to Goodreads, I have read 65 books. According to Storygraph, I've read 63. I think the reason for that discrepancy is that there are a couple of books that I have DNF'd over the year, and I think I have reviewed a couple of those on Goodreads. Like I know I did a review for Gone with the Wind, even though I didn't finish that, because I read 500 pages. Like that's a lot. I should be entitled to leave a review for that book, even if I didn't finish it, you know? So I think that's the reason for the discrepancy in numbers. According to Storygraph, I have read 21,119 pages so far. And obviously, you know, the editions that I have may have slightly different page numbers than the editions that Goodreads or Storygraph has, but overall I would say that that's pretty good. I have a goal of reading 100 books this year and 30,000 pages, and so I am cooking right along in that. And I think that I have read some really, really long books this year, but the reason that the number is so high is 65 or 63, depending which one you look at, is that according to Storygraph, 63% of the books that I have read are less than 300 pages. So I've read a lot of shorter books. I have read quite a few middle grade books in middle grade March. I've read some manga volumes. I've read some short stories and some shorter books. And so it sounds really impressive to have read that much, but I've read some shorter books and I've read some behemoths already as well. I'm also pretty pleased with the fact that I have read 6 nonfiction books so far this year. So that's only 10% overall of the books that I've read, but I have been trying to read more nonfiction, and I feel like I've been doing okay. I've been reading, you know, by that stat, like at least one a month. So that's pretty good. So far, my most read author for the year is Brandon Sanderson. I have read 4 Sanderson books. I have read Words of Radiance, Warbreaker, Edge Dancer, and Tress of the Emerald Sea. So I've read 4 of his so far. And according to Storygraph, my overall rating for books that I've read so far this year is 4.03 stars out of 5. That's pretty good. I guess I've had a pretty good reading year so far overall. So let's go ahead and dive into the tag questions now. So the first question is, what is the best book you've read so far this year? So I'm actually going to share my top 4 books with you. I have a couple other books that are also top within this, but they're going to fulfill other prompts in this tag. So I'll leave them for later. But top 4 books this year in the order that I read them. First of all, Sword of Kaigen. One of my favorite fantasies I've read this year, and I've read quite a few fantasies. The time I read it, I rated it 4 stars because I did have an issue with some of the ending stuff and some of the way that certain things were concluded. So I didn't feel like it was like a perfect book. I read this all the way back in January, I think. It was either January or February, but I think it was January. But my gosh, like I still think about this book all the time. I feel like her world building skills are just top notch. The way that she goes into just the different things that are influencing the culture. It's very Asian inspired fantasy. We get the viewpoint of a young boy who is being trained to be a warrior and his mother who has kind of some secrets in her closet. And this is such an emotional book. This book made me weep, like weep a lot. I loved it, and I felt like it did such a good job of really fleshing out characters. I feel like I knew the people in this book. Just a really great portrayal of marriage and working through marital difficulties as well. As another reason why this really jumped up in my estimation. Next book is Demons by Dostoevsky. Most of Dostoevsky books are just top notch for me, but this is so good. It was so different than a lot of other books of his that I've read. It felt more plot driven, I think. Like everything was so mysterious and it took so long for you to get the reveals. And so you're sitting in this unease and oh my goodness, it's just so good. There's so much political intrigue in this and so much like what is going on behind the surface here. As always, great exploration of human nature, of philosophy, of religion, and I love the conversations that Dostoevsky has in his books. I did a dedicated review for this one and I'll link it. Talk a lot about my favorite themes in this book in the spoiler section of that video, particularly themes of redemption and forgiveness, and so good. I loved it so much. Shockingly, the last 2 books that I have on here are both nonfiction. It's really funny to me. So Breaking Bread with the Dead by Alan Jacobs. The subtitle for this one is A Reader's Guide to a More Tranquil Life. And this book is really just a case of why you should read classics. So if you read classics and you enjoy them, you will like this. If you read classics and you have a hard time reconciling things of the past that are very prevalent in classic literature that we have kind of improved on as a society and moved past in some degree, made some improvement in it, things like, racism, misogyny, ableism, things that are very rampant and encouraged and endorsed sometimes in classic books. You have a hard time with that, this book is for you. If you're wondering, what's even the point of reading classics anyway? Aren't there just as great books nowadays? Why do I need to read a classic? This book is for you. So if you're a reader, this book is for you. I loved it so much. I just think about it so much. Oh my gosh, so good. And the last one is The Knowledge of the Holy by A.W. Tozer, which I just finished last month. And it is no surprise to me that this is making a favorites list. I'm sure it will be in my top 10 or 12 or whatever books that I choose to do for the year, because Tozer's just fantastic. I read The Pursuit of God a couple of years ago in like March, and then I read it again in like September with a group. And so I read that twice in 1 year, and I could read this one twice in 1 year as well. This one is so good. This one really focuses on the attributes of God and who God is revealed in scripture. And it's so good. Every time that I read a Tozer book, it is very formative for my faith. So loved it. The next question is, what is the best sequel that you read this year? And so far, that is Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. This is book 2 of the Farseer trilogy, and I have fallen in love with Robin Hobb in the last year. Actually, it's been less than a year, because it was last November that I read Assassin's Quest. And then I read Royal Assassin the first quarter of the year, and at the time of filming this video, I am almost done with Assassin's Quest, which is the conclusion of the Farseer trilogy, which is the first in Robin Hobb's world, the realm of the Underling. She has many series that are a part of these that just continue to build on one another. So this is the first trilogy. And Royal Assassin was so dang good. Oh, there's not too much that I can say about it because it is a sequel, but in this trilogy in general, we're following a young man named Fitz, and he is the illegitimate son of a prince who is actually in line to inherit the throne. And at the beginning of Assassin's Apprentice, he is dropped off at the castle because his grandfather and his mother are like, we can't afford to feed this boy anymore, so his dad's a prince, he should feed him. So Fitz gets dropped off there and is raised kind of, adjacent to the court, because he's not really considered royalty because he is a bastard, but he is raised just right alongside the court and grows up with all these kinds of things, and is, as you might guess from the title, is trained to be an assassin. So we're just following him as he's growing up, and he does a lot of growing up in Royal Assassin, I think. I would say that is the one where he really goes from like this little boy to manhood by the end of that book. And it's very emotional. Hobb is always so emotional, but so good. Such good characters. Number 3 is a new release that has come out that you wanted to read, but you haven't. I got nothing for this. I'm so sorry. I'm in general not very good at following new releases and books that are coming out. I am not a new release person, which if you have been here for very long, you've probably noticed that. I am very, very like picky about new releases because there's a lot of books that will come out and they'll have tons and tons of buzz. And I tend to like to wait for the dust to settle and then kind of hear what people think. If it's part of a series or an author I know really well, that's different. But in general, I like to wait and kind of see what people think a year or two afterwards. Number 4, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I actually do have one book for this. I have been reading the Myrtle Hardcastle series with Rainey and Jess, and that has been so fun. We have read those books together. We read the first 4 books so far, and book 5 comes out in October, and it is called Myrtle Means an Opportunity. And I love this series so much. It's just a lot of fun. If you like the Flavia Deluche series, I think you would like Myrtle Hardcastle, except I like Myrtle Hardcastle way more. I found Flavia kind of annoying and I really didn't like her dysfunctional family aspect. So Myrtle is Flavia 2.0 in my opinion. So if you liked the vibe of those books, you probably really like Myrtle Hardcastle. The next question is, what is your biggest disappointment of the year? And I'm going to be totally honest and say that a lot of the middle grade that I've read this year has been really disappointing. I read a lot of middle grade new releases in middle grade March, and I disliked most of them, unfortunately. But I would say that probably my 2 biggest disappointments in the middle grade genre were actually both nominated for the Newbery, and one of them won the Newbery this year. I did a vlog where I read all 4 Newbery nominees and ranked them myself as to who I think should have won. And so I really didn't like Evilise Explains It All. I really didn't like it at all. I just had massive issues for that, especially for the age that it was marketed towards. And I didn't like Freewater that much. Unfortunately, Freewater is the one that won. And I see the value of telling that story, but first of all, I thought it was way too speculative for something that was billed as historical fiction. There's so much we don't know about what the author was writing about. And there were so many viewpoints in that book that made it feel not very cohesive and made it difficult for me to feel attached to anybody. So unfortunate. I think I can see why it was nominated, but I don't think it was the best book out of the 4 that were nominated. Since I did 4 books that were my best book of the year, I'm going to do 4 books for the disappointments. So you're getting the 4 best and the 4 worst. So 2 other books that I was really disappointed with, one of which I DNF'd, is Gone with the Wind. I hated it. I get why people like it because I feel like the writing is really engaging. I think Margaret Mitchell's writing is really good, and it's really funny because apparently this is kind of inspired by Vanity Fair, which I read last fall during Victober, or actually right before Victober, and I was very underwhelmed with Vanity Fair, and I was told by someone that I needed to read Gone with the Wind because it was like Vanity Fair but with better character development. There is character development there, but they're all atrociously horrible people and I hated them all. I think Melanie was the only one that I even remotely kind of liked, and I hated every other person in this book. I actually DNF'd it, but I got 500 pages into it, and I was supposed to be buddy reading it with a couple of people who changed their mind and decided not to read it at all. And so I'm like, why am I reading this? Why am I still reading this? But I really, really hate it. And it's just annoying me every time I read it. And the people that I was reading it with aren't even reading it. So I don't even have anyone to talk to about it. So I ended up DNFing it. But it was really disappointing. I was really hoping to like it. Another book this one was even more disappointing for me than Gone with the Wind. This might be my most disappointing book of the year, actually. The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim. People love this book. They love this book. Talk about how it's like one of their favorite books ever, and I don't get it. I'm so sorry. I love the nature writing, but again, we have despicable people and character development that doesn't even make sense to me because people are supposed to show their growth, and some people, first of all, did not grow at all, and secondly, the people who did grow, most of their growth is very unbelievable for me, except for the old lady. I forget what the old lady's name is. But everyone else, their character growth wasn't even believable to me. I'm like, so you come to a place that is beautiful and all of a sudden you're a different person? What happens when you go back to where you were before? Are you going to go back to the same person that you were before? Can a being in a place for a month literally change fundamentally who you are as a person? I just don't find that believable. So unfortunately, I really wanted to love it. I really wanted to love it. And I think I gave it 2 stars because I just was so annoyed the whole time. But I loved her nature writing that I wanted so much. I wanted to visit San Salvatore, but I would read something else by her. I would, because I liked her writing that much. I just didn't like the people. Number 6, biggest surprise of the year so far. And this is one of my favorite books of the year that I already mentioned, but I didn't put it in there because it fits this prompt. Labyrinth by Borges. I'm shocked. If you've watched my wrap up for June and actually my vlog where I finished it, you'll know I was shocked at how much this book impacted me, at how much I enjoyed this book, the exploration in this book. Like Borges, it's difficult to describe him because this is a compilation of short stories, essays, and parables, which are even shorter short stories. And Borges just has a way of delving into things, into philosophical things, intellectual things, different religious beliefs and things from different religions. I mean, he talks about Judaism, he talks about Buddhism, he talks about Christianity. So it's not like this is even limited to one religion. He has a way of diving into these things and digging into topics and then handing it to you and being like, what do you think? You have to think about this. This is a book you have to really, really engage with. It's not one that you can just passively read. This is not this entertaining, popcorny, fun to read book. It's one that really engages your brain and you really have to think about it. He's not telling you, and here's the conclusion to my thought process on this. It's like, and what do you think? It just like blew my mind, and I read it at the same time as I read The Knowledge of the Holy by Tozer, and it felt like those books were talking to each other, and I felt like it was also talking to Breaking Bread with the Dead, and I felt like it was also talking to other books that I was reading at the time or had read recently, and my word, this is one that is just going to be stuck in my brain for forever. I will be shocked if it doesn't make it on the top 10 list for the whole year. Okay, number 8 is newest fictional crush. I don't really do fictional crushes. I really don't. So I saw someone do this. Maybe it was Amanda from The Curly Reader. I can't remember if it was her. Somebody who, instead of using this question in the past as saying fictional crush, they said like newest like couple that you loved. So for this one, I'm gonna be repetitive and just say Molly and Fitz from Royal Assassin. Love their relationship. I just do. So not gonna say anything else because I could spoil it so bad with even just like a little bit of a hint. So I'm not going to, but I love them together. Number 9 is newest favorite character. And I'm not really totally sure. I love Dorothea from Middlemarch. I love her. There were many people in that book that I had a very mixed relationship with. Some that I came around and liked towards the end, some that I never liked, some that I started out liking and ended up hating. I had a very tumultuous relationship with a lot of people in Middlemarch because they feel like real people. They feel just very messy and very flawed. And Dorothea has her own flaws, but I could at least relate to Dorothea, and I like her a lot. I also I'm so sad that I do not remember her name. I feel like a horrible person. I listed this as one of my favorite books so far, but the mother in The Sword of Kaigen. I'll put her name on the screen. But again, it's been like 5 months since I read this book, and she has a name that's not one that's familiar to me. I love her. Like, what a kick butt woman. For real. Like, in so many ways. And her growth in this book of learning to forgive herself and learning to actually like love people around her and just, I love her. Book that made you cry is the next question. There were quite a few, actually. I already mentioned Sword of Kaigen. which probably made me cry the most maybe, but close second, Peace Like a River by Leaf Anger. Another book that actually really surprised me because this was on my read or read project and it ended up being a 5-star book. So this book is historical fiction and it's about this family, and the oldest son in the family does something that kind of gets him on the wrong side of the law, and he kind of runs from the law. And so we're following this family as they're kind of trying to track him down. The dad in this book is so good. I love him. And there is a scene at the end that is so poignantly beautiful, just exploring spirituality and heaven and God and faith and miracles and all those things in one. And I wept. So beautiful. On another note, a book that made you happy. The book that made me the happiest this year has to be Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This book is all I have ever wanted and needed in my whole life. That's dramatic. I didn't even list it as a favorite. It is though. It is a favorite. It was a 5-star book. It's not my favorite Brandon Sanderson ever though. Tress is essentially like inspired by The Princess Bride, which I love. So it has that really witty, funny feel to it. It's told by a character who is in other Sanderson books, and that's all I'm going to tell you about that. So it's in a very specific voice and feels tonally completely different than any Sanderson book that I have ever read, which I think really says something about his writing, that he can write this lyrical, fairy tale like witty and yet insightful book. Like that's how the voice feels. Like I would be laughing one minute and then wanting to underline a passage the next. And I just loved it. It was so fun. It made me laugh out loud so many times. I didn't feel like particularly wowed by the story itself in terms of just like, I wasn't surprised, saw the ending coming, but doesn't change the fact that I loved it. Question number 12, the most beautiful book that you have purchased or received this year. I received in January or February a book from a subscriber. I got the Marjolaine Baston version of Little Women. This book is gorgeous. Obviously the cover is gorgeous. There's a ribbon bookmark, which I just love anyway. We have such beautiful illustrations on the pages, but beyond even that, the thing that makes this edition super special to me is tucked within the pages. You have really random little things in here. So this is the Pickwick Portfolio, which is the newspaper that Jo and her sister make, and it's so cool. We have like a letter in here to the March family as well. There's a little pamphlet in here about women's suffrage movements and all of that kind of stuff. And there's a little thing here that says the world of Little Women. I think that this might be a map, actually. I haven't actually opened this one yet. Oh, it kind of is. It's actually like a family tree and every character in the book. So I love this. It was so beautiful, so unexpected, so sweet, and I'm really, really thankful for it. I actually have Pride and Prejudice in this edition as well that my in-laws got me for Christmas last year. And I just love these editions. They are so gorgeous. And Little Women was my favorite book of 2021 and probably one of my favorite, well, definitely one of my favorite books of all time. I love it with all my heart. So to have it in this edition is really, really special. I think I now have this book in 3 or 4 editions and I'm not mad about it, but this is such a treasure. It's so beautiful. Last but not least, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? A lot. Like, a lot. I am not halfway through my read or read project, which is unfortunate. There's like 24 books on that, and I'm not halfway. I have my classics TBR, which I have read a few of the books on there, 4 out of 14. That's not very good. I have plans to read quite a few more throughout the rest of the year though. I have like 4 or 5 more of them scheduled, so that's good. So there's a couple that are not scheduled at all, like Things Fall Apart and 100 Years of Solitude and Arabian Nights. Those are the ones that are not scheduled at all. The rest of them are actually scheduled, or I have actually started them. So that's not too bad, but there's still quite a few of those that I need to read. I am going to finish the completed books so far of the Stormlight Archive this year. So those are a couple more I still need to read. Oathbringer and Rhythm of War. So really excited to read those. I'm just trying in general to read more series. So almost completed Farseer trilogy. I will be up to date on the Stormlight Archives. I'm up to date on Spy Family. So I'm actually doing better than I thought I would with my series. So that's a goal that's going well, but there are still more that I need to read from that as well. But, you know, overall, I think the list that I need to focus on more are probably my classic CBR and my reader read project. So that's how my year is going so far. Those are my favorite books, my least favorite books, the books that surprised me, the books that disappointed me, and, you know, just my stats in general. So I'd love to hear from you down below. Do you kind of do reassessments like this quarterly or halfway through the year or anything like that? I love to do that. I often find that I'm really off track from where I wanted to be, but that's okay. I'm more of a type B personality, so it's fine. I'm not going to worry about it. But I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. Do you have a favorite book of the year so far? And if so, what is it? Or if you want to give a couple, that's fine too. If you want to rant and give me your least favorite books of the year, I am here for a good rant as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me. And I will see you again next time.